All right, so let me just say a few words about what it is that we're going to do, because without us, people basically go into the voting booth and they can give a mandate to 4 more years of Wall Street rule and corporate rule. And that's what you have with the other candidates. And so when people say to me, well, I'm not sure, is it the right thing to do? What we say back is that to do anything but vote for us, me, this campaign, our campaign is basically to give that mandate to the corporate sponsored candidates, whereas voting for the Green Party is basically a vote for that just and sustainable future. And what that means specifically, what we're talking about, our highest priority is this Green New Deal. So you may have heard about that. Sean was part of our presentation at the conference yesterday, where we talked about the Green New Deal. So we're talking actually about an emergency program to create 25 million jobs, put 25 million people to work, everyone who needs a job. And a full-time job. These are jobs that will also end the recession, end unemployment. We're actually talking about ending unemployment as a new condition of our economy, as well as ending the recession, because once people go back to work, you don't have a recession anymore, and transitioning to the green economy that we need, and combating climate change in the process of doing that. So that is sort of our headliner, and that, by the way, it includes reforms not just to the economy but also to our financial system, because you got to have the money to pay for it. So we're talking about breaking up the banks. We're talking about establishing public banks, regulating derivatives, separating the investment from the commercial banks, et cetera. All those fundamental things we need to do so that we have a financial system that supports the real economy and the secure green economy that enable our communities to make those investments that we need, instead of supporting the fake economy of high finance that doesn't serve us. So that's the financial side, and then we're also talking about the democracy reforms, because in order to get these policies, we need to actually connect public opinion with policymaking and with our governance, and right now there's just that incredible disconnect. So we're talking about ensuring that everyone has a right to vote, putting an end to these draconian voter ID laws that keep people away from the voting booths. We're making sure that the votes get counted with hand-marked paper ballots, so that we actually have a voting system with integrity and we can be confident of the vote. And we're talking about electoral reforms to get the money out of politics so that our votes are not bought. They really represent public opinion, not corporate spin. And to also make sure that our votes are counted in a voting system that makes those votes meaningful, so that it's not winner take all with a plurality vote of 30% or whatever. So these are things that Greens have been talking about for a long time, but all of a sudden now they are out on the airwaves and out on the street, and Occupy is talking about them, and people are actually looking to those kinds of electoral reforms. And I'll mention just a few of the other policies that we're also talking about independently of the Green New Deal. We're talking about healthcare as a human right. Finally, joining the community of nations and adopting Medicare for all, getting rid of the massive waste in that massive private health insurance bureaucracy, putting our healthcare dollars into healthcare, and also stabilizing medical inflation, which is actually the biggest driver in the rising costs of healthcare. So it doesn't cost us, it actually saves us trillions of dollars through a single payer system. We're going to save money and be able to put those dollars into the other things that we need. We are talking about putting a moratorium on foreclosures. We are calling for bringing the troops home now from Iraq and Afghanistan, and also putting an end to these proxy wars that are going on through the drone warfare. Bringing the drones home, as well as the troops home, and the troops from the over 1,000 bases scattered in over 100 countries around the world, and cutting this massive military industrial security complex budget, which is about $1 trillion a year, cutting that in half so that we can actually put that money into the investments that we need in our communities to actually conduct the Green New Deal. I want to mention also forgiving student debt. because we should be bailing out our students and not the big banks. Those bailouts are ongoing, and we need to put an end to them. If we came up with $13 trillion in free loans and giveaways to bail out the banks, we can come up with $1 trillion to bail out our students and make them productive members of our economy again. And while we're at it, make public higher education free, because a high school degree we recognized as essential throughout the 20th century. In the same way, we need to look to a college degree now for economic security in the 21st century. We did it for GIs returning from the war, and we got back $7 through revenues, basically, through the improvements in the economy. So it's a huge, profitable investment in our younger generation. In our campaign, we are talking not just about environmental justice and economic justice and racial justice, we're all talking about generational justice, because young people are getting the short end of the stick on the cost of education, becoming indentured servants, really having to service their debt without having jobs that enable them to pay for it. So they're looking at debt, without end, essentially, as indentured servants, as well as inheriting the climate crisis, which is going to fall hardest on their shoulders, obviously, as well as the really hard end of the jobs crisis, too. So we're talking about generational justice as well. And we can do this, and we can do it right, and the public agrees with us. On poll after poll, large majorities agree with us on all the issues. So the one thing I want to leave you with is the idea that it's time to stand up to that fear campaign. That fear campaign has been going on for at least the last decade, and it told us we couldn't vote our values or our vision because something bad might happen. We had to be very afraid. So for the past decade or so, many people of conscience have sort of silenced their consciences and not listened to their consciences and voted their fears. And after 10 years, what we see really clearly is that silence is not an effective political strategy, and that the politics of fear has brought us everything we were afraid of. All those things we were supposed to be quiet so we wouldn't get, guess what? We got them in spades. So the lesson there is that democracy needs not silence and fear, but actually voices and values and a vision. Democracy needs a moral compass, and that compass depends on voices of the public interest and not corporate spin. If we're not in the mix, what have you got? You've got corporate-sponsored candidates articulating a corporate agenda. So it's not just okay for us to stand up, and for people of conscience to stand up, and for people who care about Medicare for all, or who care about the climate, or who care about civil liberties or peace. It's not just okay for them to stand up for what we need and deserve. It's life-saving and essential and planet-saving that they do. It's really clear that to sit on the sidelines now or to muzzle yourself is just lethal. That's not the way forward. We need to answer the politics of fear with the politics of courage. And in fact, to look back over the history of progressive movement, it has always required an independent political voice. And usually that's been a small independent party. Like abolition had the Liberty Party, like women's vote had the Women's Party, like the right to unionize had the Labor Party and the Socialist Party, and Social Security and the New Deal had in fact the Progressive Party. So in the same way that Frederick Douglass stated so beautifully that power never concedes without a demand, never has, never will. Same is true in the electoral realm. We need to bring that demand into the electoral realm. And that's what we are going to do. To do it as a campaign alone, no, of course, we need a social movement. But we greatly leverage that social movement by bringing it into the world of electoral discourse. Because you can't tune it out. It's everywhere. It occupies huge airspace and social space and community space. And if we abdicate it You know, if we just surrender to the political predators, or if we surrender by not being there and not participating, we've given up the ship. And we can't give up the ship. We need to save the ship right now. And that's what this campaign is about. That's what we're going to do. It's about standing up with that politics of courage and taking back that promise of democracy, using this breaking point as the tipping point that it can be, and getting out there and telling our friends and our social networks and networking in every way we can, as was done in the Arab Spring, where they didn't have the help of the media, they didn't have deep pockets or corporate money behind them, but they brought down dictators and they totally changed the world. It's an ongoing struggle, but it has moved forward in a way that was just entirely unimaginable just more than a year ago. So I think we need to take a lesson from that, stand up, find our courage, and move forward doing what needs to be done, turning this breaking point into a tipping point and taking back the promise of democracy and the secure, healthy, just, green future that we deserve and that actually is within our reach. So thank you for being a part of that.